1915, when World War I started. Right at that time, Great Britain and France joined forces against the Ottoman Empire. And yes, British won the war, using their old tactics in this Palestinian region. The British called the Arab rebels in Palestine. If you join us, we will help you build your own state in the Palestinian territories. The Arab revolutionaries of the time dreamed of a unified Arab state from Syria to Yemen. So they joined the British, again to attract American Jewish businessmen. The British also promised a separate state for the Jews living in Palestine if they joined the British in the war. The British thought that keeping the Jews on their side would increase their influence in America. But fooling both parties, the British entered into another agreement with France, such that after winning the war, they will divide the Arab territories separately. And so it happened. After World War I, Britain and France divided the Arab territories between themselves, where the Palestine area came under the hands of Great Britain, and the British started their own settlement there. The time is after 1940. German dictator Adolf Hitler began World War II by exterminating all of Europe's Jews. Hitler killed about 6 million Jews. Coming to the brink of annihilation, the Jews again began to refuge here and there, with a large number again coming to Palestine. And Palestine was in the possession of Britain. Initially, Britain allowed Jews to enter Palestine, but at some point they were prevented from entering Palestine. And from here an anger arose among the Jews inside Palestine and they began to agitate for their own separate country. The time is 1948. Hitler's forces were defeated in World War II. In this war, Britain also suffered a lot of economic recession and political instability. Britain slowly closed its colonies from everywhere. So Britain relinquished control of the Palestinian territories, agreeing to give separate states to Palestinians and Jews. But the British did not divide the country. They put the responsibility on the United Nations. The United Nations divided the occupied Palestinian territories into two countries, of which about 55% is given to the Jews and about 45% is given to the Palestinians. And it is also said that since Jerusalem is a holy land for the people of three religions, Jews, Christians, Muslims, its power will not belong to any of the two countries. Its authority will rest with the United Nations. The Jews accepted this proposal of the United Nations and on May 14, 1948 named the country Israel and started the journey of their own country. This is how it was created in the country called Israel. First Arab-Israeli War. The Jews accepted the UN proposal to establish Israel, but the Arab states surrounding the Palestinian territories rejected the UN proposal. And they refused to give even a single piece of land to Israel. And in 1948 Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Iraq started war against the one-day-old state of Israel. They were later joined by Saudi Arabia, Morocco, Yemen, and Sudan. The wounds of the Second World War had not dried up for the Israelis. They did not forget the deeds of Hitler. So they knew their backs were against the wall. If they do not fight for their lives, then the Jewish community will disappear from the world. And so they too fight with all their might. What happened next is bound to surprise anyone. A newly born country fights against 8 countries simultaneously and wins a war. This war lasted for almost a year. Although there is no loss in Israel's war, the main loss is Palestine. After the war, it turned out that the country that was supposed to be called Palestine consisted of 2 territories. One is the Gaza Strip and the other is the West Bank. After the war, it can be seen that the occupation of the Gaza Strip is now in the hands of Egypt and the West is occupied by Jordan. Which means that there is no other country left in Palestine. After losing their land to Egypt and Jordan, about 700,000 Palestinians had to become refugees in various Arab countries. In 1967, war broke out again with Israel and the rest of the surrounding Arab countries. It is known as the Second Arab-Israeli War. This war of only 6 days can be called a shame for Egypt, Jordan, Syria. Because in this war Israel won and the Arabs lost. Israel not only lost but also occupied the Gaza Strip near Egypt and the West Bank near Jordan. Not only that, Israel captured not only the Gaza Strip from Egypt, but also Egypt's own land, the Sinai Peninsula, and captured the Syrian Golan Heights from Syria. As the saying goes, kings fight against each other and the Alakagara dies. The same was the case with the Palestinians. Most of the Palestinians died in the Arab-Israeli War. Their land goes once in its hands and once in his hands. They don't get it anymore. And from this in 1964 Palestine Liberation Organization was born, which is abbreviated as PLO. The PLO was initially called a terrorist organization because it wanted to conquer everything by arms and deny Israel and take land from them. They gradually withdrew from terrorist activities and were officially recognized by the United Nations in 1974. And regard them as guardians of the Palestinians. Come now. In 1977–78, there were several rounds of peace talks between Israel and Egypt, and these talks were ultimately successful. Egypt became the first Arab country to recognize Israel as a state. And Israel also returned Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, which it had occupied for nearly 10 years. Because of this peace meeting in 1878, Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin and Egyptian President Anwar Sadat are awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. This peace meeting with Israel became a nightmare for Anwar Sadat. Extremists stand against Israel for accepting and making peace agreements. And in 1981 some radical members of the army killed him. Since 1967, Israel has occupied the Palestinian territories of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. As the occupation progressed, the Israelites settled in the West Bank closer to Jerusalem. Internationally, these settlements are called illegal, but the Israeli government repeatedly says that it does not interfere in these settlements, although the Israeli government had a hand in it. Land prices in the West Bank were also relatively cheap, which was one of the reasons for the settlement. So for the devout rich Jews it was a grab. Among these, Yitzhak Rabin became the Prime Minister of Israel in 1992, which directly recognizes the PLO. In his statement, he said that PLO is not a terrorist organization. They just want their own country. And this resulted in peace talks between Yitzhak Rabin and PLO chief Yasser Arafat. Since that meeting, Palestine has almost come to the brink of creating its own separate state. Although the Gaza Strip and the West Bank belong to Palestine according to the United Nations proposal, when it comes to the war, the Palestinians are living in very small places. And there are many Israeli settlements there. And so the service on the West Bank is divided into 3 areas called Area A, B and C. While Area C will be controlled by the PLO, Area C will be controlled by Israel. And Area B will be administered jointly by Israel and Palestine. This is the historic Oslo Accord. According to this agreement, the first Palestinian government was formed in Palestine in 1994, which was named the Palestinian National Authority. Because of these peace talks, Israeli Prime Minister and PLO leader Yasser Arafat won the Nobel Peace Prize. Meanwhile, in 1987 some fundamentalist Palestinian leaders called the PLO too secular and formed a separate group called Hamas. Hamas ideology is similar to that of the early PLO. They reject Israel and want to eradicate them from the land forever. This is how Israel and Palestine went through a state of war for years. Again, the tension between the PLO and Hamas inside Palestine was increasing day by day. Meanwhile, Hamas won the 2006 Palestinian elections by a very narrow margin, which increases the tension of both parties. Hamas has a majority in the Gaza Strip, and the PLO in the West Bank. A civil war between Hamas and the PLO began when some Hamas hardliners killed a PLO leader from the roof of a large building in the midst of this tension after winning the election, which is known as the Battle of Gaza. This civil war, which lasted from June 10 to 15, 2007, is known as the Battle of Gaza. Since then, the Gaza Strip is under the control of Hamas and the West Bank is under the control of the PLO. And so whenever we see any news about Israel and Palestine, the name Gaza is very common. And all the missiles I see are from Gaza. On the other hand, although not economically independent, the West Bank region is very peaceful and working for its own economic emancipation. On the other hand, Gaza is sinking day by day. The per capita income of Gaza is currently less than $100 due to the pressure of the sanctions of the 2 neighboring countries, Egypt and Israel. The only airport that exists is also unusable. Gaza has only 5 universities. All of them are closed. Because all young people are busy fighting. In the last 10 years, the number of schools has increased to only about 100. Although they are not managed properly. This is the bloody history of Palestine and Israel for the last 100 years. The way things are going, this blood addiction does not seem to stop in the next 100 years. So let's not quarrel and be friends. We live in this world in the morning. Dear friends, this was today's video about the bloody history of Palestine and Israel. If you like the video, please share it with your friends. Dear friend, subscribe to the channel. Thank you.